Hey guys, welcome to Hired How to Get the Jobs weekly review. Today we're going to be talking about how to customize your resume in the shortest amount of time, how to be best prepared for the most important interview during the hiring process, and which one that is. So feel free to put your guess in the comments. If you don't necessarily know, you don't have to guess, but if you think you know which interview is going to be the most important in the hiring process, feel free to put your guess there, and I'll tell you what I think when we get there. And then as always, your Q&A. So with that, my name is Tony Martin, and this is How to Get the Jobs weekly review. Now, let me just let you know that today we are flying with a little bit of lack of a net, for lack of a better term. I have a 4- and a 6-year-old next door. My wife is doing a training. And if you saw my video earlier this week where my daughter came in talking about her shoes, this could be even crazier. So if nothing else, other than to see me potentially crash and burn, you should watch this video. Now with that, let's talk to you a little bit about how to customize well, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. So follow me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and subscribe to my YouTube channel because I do different things on different platforms. On Facebook and LinkedIn, I do a weekly show. LinkedIn is every Wednesday at 10 o'clock. Facebook is every Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And I also do weekly videos that I put out there on those platforms as well, all geared around resume writing, interviewing tips, things like that. When we get over to the Instagram side, that's really where I give daily tips. So if you're someone like me who, well, I never was diagnosed with ADHD, but I am convinced I have it because back when I was a kid, it wasn't popular to talk about it, or you just didn't get diagnosed or get medication. But I'm convinced I have it. And if a 7-minute or a 30-minute video for you is just too much of content for you to digest it, then you want to go over to the Instagram and you want to be following me there, because there I give daily tips around a weekly theme. And last week was networking, how to network during COVID-19 and different tips around networking. The week before was all emotional intelligence interviewing. We did that for 2 or 3 weeks where I gave out interviewing questions, what traits they were actually exploring, and then some more tips about how to answer those difficult questions and why those questions are even being asked. And then we go back a little further and I've done tips on LinkedIn profiles, a week of LinkedIn profiles, and how to up your LinkedIn profile and how to make it more recognizable. And that's certainly some skills that we all need during this pandemic and during this time where there's a lot of people looking. So with all that, and then lastly, again, YouTube is where you should subscribe to catch all these videos. If you can't follow me live, if you just like the Q&A, every one of these Wednesday or Thursday videos, I do Q&A. Goal is at the 15-minute marker. So zoom to the 15-minute marker of all these videos and get to the Q&A section of the YouTube videos. But either way, all this stuff is out there to help you navigate this world and hopefully help show you how to get the job. So let's talk a little bit about customizing your resume. But before we get into the customization, let me just kind of give you a few more tips today about resumes in general and kind of my philosophy on it. Now, if you've ever listened to me, I don't like absolute statements. So I don't like saying you should never or you should always, because typically I can come up with a reason why what I'm saying or what that person said is wrong. So if I make an absolute statement in the next 10 minutes, realize that this is in my philosophy most of the time, okay? So now, most of the time on your resume, you should lead with what makes you different, okay? What makes you different isn't that you have an MBA if you're applying to a job where an MBA is required. Because everyone who's qualified for that job is going to have an MBA, and you just saying Joe Smith, MBA shows me you have one, which means you don't need to make your top section an educational section which highlights your MBA. You need to put the MBA in the bottom of the resume unless you just got it last week and it's the only thing you've done because you just got an MBA and you went to college before that, you haven't actually worked yet. But you should lead with your accomplishments, your experience, because that's what makes you different. Everyone that's applying for a job that requires an MBA has the MBA if they're going to be moved forward. The recruiter isn't going to pass on you because they couldn't find your MBA in the educational section on the back page. But put it there because that's where it belongs, okay? Make sure that when you are doing your customization of your resume, make sure that your most relevant stuff is also on top, okay? Make sure as you're applying to the job that you're looking at, make sure that you're putting the stuff that they care about. You're not putting a bunch of things they don't care about, okay? We'll get more into that in a second. Next, don't overcomplicate your resume. Often I'll see resumes that say I'm a proactive self-starter in the top line. Now, I've never seen anyone write a resume that says I'm a sloth who doesn't care. Now, first of all, if you are waiting to write your resume until you find the job, you're not very proactive. And I'll explain why in a little bit second about that too. But don't use adjectives that anybody can say and they're meaningless unless the job description specifically says we are looking for a proactive self-starter. Then probably in my professional summary, I'd probably put up a proactive self-starter if I really believe I am. But in general, don't put words like that that fluff you up, that add a lot of words and characters, but don't add much value to you at the end of the day, because I don't think they really differentiate you from anybody else. Next, focus on accomplishments that are interchangeable. And what I mean by that is that there's some accomplishments that are very specific for the job that you do. You might be a mechanic on an offshore drilling rig and you work on top drives and mud pumps and you work on all the hydrorackers, you work on all these specific types of gear. Now, realize that the guy or gal that's looking at your resume is like me or worse. I've never been a driller offshore. I've never been a mechanic. I gotta hire a pig farmer and a roustabout and a CEO and a CFO and a procurement analyst and a payroll specialist. I can't do any of those jobs. So if you talk about the specific pieces of equipment that you work on, I don't know if that's relevant or not, most likely. But I do know from talking to the hiring manager that I'm looking for someone that specializes in mechanical and hydraulic equipment. So when you're working on your resume, especially if you're trying to transition from one industry to another, and I work with a lot of clients that the number one thing we're doing when we make their resume together is we are making their resume more industry open, less industry focused. So for this kind of scenario with a mechanic, rather than say I work on these pieces of equipment, I might say routinely maintain over $500 million of mechanical equipment that's hydraulically powered or something like that, because that shows the reader the scope of how big of the projects you're actually working on. So realize that that's part of your job, okay, is to help the reader understand what you're doing, because the truth is that we write our resume for the hiring manager, okay? You often write your resume for the person you're gonna work for, but we don't actually realize that the person we're going to work for isn't the first person that's going to read my resume. The person that's going to read my resume on the front end might only have 6 months of experience inside the company and doesn't have a clue about what the company does. They were just told, hey, go post this job and go find me some resumes. And truthfully, that is all of the guidance we get sometimes. So write your resume that they'll understand it in terms that they'll understand. Okay, so with that, now let's get into the actual customization part. Now, this is a really important conversation that I have weekly with my clients. And this is part of what I do when I help you with your resume. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in about resumes and things like that, and I'll make sure we get to them. But when you're customizing your resume, the very first thing you need to do is you need to take the current resume you have and you need to color code it. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, you might be a product development person who's also been an engineer, who's been a business development person, who's done marketing, and maybe some project management. You might have 5 skills, and right now you're looking for a job. So you might have 5 different traits or skills that you'd be qualified to do if the right job presented itself. So what do you need to do? You need to make sure that your resume is going to be customized to each one of those jobs, because if you use the same resume that you're applying to a business development role that you would apply to an engineering or a project management job, you're probably not going to get any of those jobs because your resume is too watered down in all those areas and lacks focus. But waiting till you see the job you want to apply to and then customizing or building your resume for that one job is really time consuming. And if you put proactive on top of your resume, then you're not proactive. This is what you're doing. You need to be proactive, and this is how you customize your resume. So take your current resume right now, resave it as your name, long version. Once you do that, look at your resume and start categorizing your accomplishments into different buckets. Okay, so let's just go with the first example. You're a product development person. Okay, you probably have led a team before. You probably have some leadership skills. So any leadership bullet that I see on my resume, I'm going to highlight purple because it's the color of royalty. And then on the bottom of my resume, I'm going to make a legend, and I'm going to put purple equals leadership. And then I'm going to look at my resume. Any project management experience, I might highlight red. And all my red bullets will be on there. Then I'll put on the bottom project management. Now you might have a bullet that's half leadership, half project management. So in that case, you're going to make it purple and red. And that's going to highlight to you that that bullet has both leadership elements as well as project management elements. And you're going to do this throughout your entire resume. And it's going to be in the right format, but highlighted different colors. Then the tough part happens. The tough part happens when now you have to rebuild your experience that you forgot about because it was 15 years ago. But truthfully, the experience 15 years ago might be the experience that's most relevant for the job you're applying for right now. So you need to, at that point, you need to make sure that the job experience that you had 15 years ago is also highlighted. So you need to think about, okay, 15 years ago I was doing this. What were my leadership bullets from 15 years ago? You need to write them, highlight them purple. Project management bullets, business development bullets. You need to think about all those different things you did, and this might turn your 2-page resume into a 4, 8, 6-page resume. Now here's the thing though, and when I work with a client, we work on their resume together, often the product we finish with is a long resume that they're never going to use, but now they can cherry pick which skills are the most important. So what does that look like? Here's what happens now. So you've built this long resume, you've color coded it. And this is really, we're talking about a chronological resume, but if you do a functional resume, it gets a little bit easier too, because then you just put your functions in the resume. And if you have any questions about functional versus chronological, reach out to me, we can talk about this. But your functional resume would have project management, 4 or 5 accomplishment bullets for project management. Then it would have product development, 4 or 5 accomplishments for product development. Then it would have business development, 4 or 5 accomplishments, and then you can just simply copy and paste the most relevant section and put that on top of your resume to make sure you're leading with what qualifies you for the job. But on the chronological side, as you're doing this, what's going to happen then tomorrow? You're going to see a job and you're going to get excited about it. You're going to apply to it. And you're going to realize as you look at that job description, okay, this is a 35% product development job, a 25% business development job. It's going to be a 20% marketing job, and maybe a 20% PM job, project management. So I need to make sure that as I looked at those bullets and realized this is the complement of bullets for the job description, I need to make sure that the resume I submit has the same ratio of bullets. I hope that makes sense. Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense to you. Because if you do that, then when you send your resume into the company, they're going to see. They're not going to see it because you're listing it out and they're going to go, oh, because no recruiter goes, oh, this is a 50% leadership role. But they're going to see a pattern in your resume that's going to match the job description, and it's going to help get you to the front of the line for an interview. Always too, remember, you got to apply within the first 3 days of that job going live or no one's going to talk to you. Okay. Now let's go into how to prepare for the most important interview in the process. If you think you know what the most important interview in the process is, feel free to write it in the comments. And but with that, I don't see anyone who was brave enough to chime in. So let me tell you, in my opinion, now I have a wife who is a VP of HR, and we differ on a lot of opinions. And like I always say on this thing, look, my opinion is just my opinion, and hopefully I've worked with enough companies that my opinion will help you more than the average person's opinion, because I have a whole bunch of companies here that I've worked with that either validate or built my opinion to be what it is. So, but we both agree, my wife and I, we both agree with this, which is the first interview is the most important one, and here's why. Your first interview, you are talking to the person who is least qualified to do your job. The next interview you're going to talk is the hiring manager or someone who might have been doing professionally what they're doing longer. Often the phone screen happens with someone who's fairly new in the industry or new in the job, and your job is to convince them that you're good enough for them to put their name behind you and present you to the hiring manager or whoever's part of that value chain. And I can't tell you how many times when I've worked with recruiters, I've said, look, do you like this candidate? Well, I kind of like them. Well, if you kind of like them, then they're not good enough. You need to be sure you're going to put your name behind the candidate. So you need to convince the person with the least amount of experience that you're qualified for the job. Now, this is a difficult task, but you have to do this in a few different ways, okay? The first, you have to do your homework on the front end. We've already talked about customizing your resume on the front end. Now it's how do you apply for a job to set you up for the most success. When you're applying to a job, here's what happens, right? You apply to a job. Right now it's 10:15, so I'm going to be late on the Q&A. We'll get to the Q&A in 5 minutes. I'm sorry. It's 10:15. I applied to the job right now. Are you going to get a call at 10:16? No. Now, I've done that before where I just happened to be in that job requisition at the time you applied to it, and then I pick up the phone and call you because you look like you're a good fit. I know you're online. But rarely does that happen, 1 out of 100. Most of the time what happens is you apply to the job, and then you go away, and 3 weeks later on a random Tuesday, you get a phone call, and it looks like this. Hey, Joe, this is Tony Martin with howtogetthejob.blog. How are you doing? Oh, I'm great, Tony. How are you? Oh, I'm good, Joe. Hey, do you have a couple minutes to talk? Yeah, absolutely. Hey, why'd you apply to our company? Tony, I got to be honest with you. I'm not sure. I've applied to a lot of companies. I don't even know what you guys do. That is the second to worst case scenario, but happens very often. The worst case scenario is you try to fake it. Oh, I'm really excited about your company. I've heard you do a lot of great things. I'm just really passionate about your culture and your people. Oh, great. What specifically? Well, I know you do this and that. Well, actually, Joe, we don't do this or that. And I've had that conversation. That's the worst case scenario. You don't do that, okay? We'll talk about how to handle that phone call when it comes in, but this is what you need to do on the front end to prepare yourself. So when you get that phone call 3 weeks later, you're not confused and you can handle it quickly and effectively and make the best first impression, because I am the only person I know of that has actually told Joe in that scenario, Joe, I'm going to call you back in 24 hours. Do yourself a favor, research my company, How to Get the Job, and let me know when I call you. We're going to pretend this never happened, and we're going to do a redo. I have done that for Joe. I don't know any other recruiter who has ever done that. So don't wait for a recruiter to give you that chance. So here's what you do. Step 1, when you apply to the job, you've customized your resume, you've sent in your resume, you've sent it into the company, right? Step 2, you print out the job description. You actually print it out. You print out the about page of the company. You staple those together. You print out your resume, the specific one you used to apply. You staple that to the packet. So now you have a packet of 3 things. Then you go to 3 different locations. We've talked about this before, so I'll breeze over this, but you go to Indeed, Salary.com, Payscale.com, and Glassdoor, and you figure out what the salary should be for that job. Then when you keep that port, and you write that salary down too on the job description, by the way, because here's what's going to happen. 3 weeks from now, you're going to get a phone call, and this is how the phone call should look. Hey, Joe, this is Tony Martin with How to Get the Job. Do you have a second to talk? Actually, Tony, I know I applied to you guys recently. I'm really excited about the opportunity with you. However, you make up an excuse. If I have 20 minutes for a phone screen, I have 18 minutes for a phone screen. Can I call you back in 2 minutes, Tony? I'm right now in the middle of disciplining my kid. I'm in the middle of making my son breakfast. I'm in the middle of driving my car and I want to pull over to be safe. Whatever. Give yourself 2 minutes. Yeah, absolutely, no problem. I'll just give you a call back. Because we as recruiters understand you didn't drop your whole life when you applied to this job waiting by the phone for it to ring. You should have, but we know you didn't. It's okay. What you need to do, though, is you need to then always have your portfolio with you with every job you ever applied to in alphabetical order, however you organize it. So that way, when you hang up the phone, you go to your binder and you quickly go, okay, what job was that? What job was that? Oh, here's how to get the job. Okay, here's what they do. Yep, I remember that. Here's the job description. Good, I remember that. Here's my resume. Great. Call back Tony. Tony, hey, this is Joe. Can we talk now? Yeah, absolutely. Great. And then I ask my first question. Don't let me ask my first question other than, are you doing okay? Don't let me ask my first interview question before you've had a chance to fully get up to speed on the job description. And if you have it with you at all times, it's in your car. Maybe you have 2 copies, one that's always in your car, one that's always at your home. I don't know. I would just say you have a portfolio with you, and it's like your phone, it's like your wallet, it's always with you. And then that way you can pull over to the side of the road and look at it or whatever. But that will set you up for success on the interview. That is a very critical thing that just doesn't happen enough in this world. So with that, I have to stop saying with that. So I don't know how to stop saying that, but I catch myself doing that a lot. So I'm going to start working on stopping that. So now let's get to our Q&A. Make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm sorry we're 4 minutes late for the Q&A, but this is the time where if you have any live questions, type them in. I always prioritize those questions, but fortunately I have been working with a lot of clients this week and last week on resumes. So I will have a lot of questions already ready to go from clients that I've been working with. And so let's start. So the first question I got this week was, how do you ensure you're hiring someone, when you're hiring someone, that they're good for your culture? How do you make sure they're a cultural fit? Now, this is really on my corporate business. So I do resume writing, I do interview coaching, I do all this stuff for candidate clients. For corporate clients, this is what I do. I sit down with a corporate team and we assess their culture, we assess how are they evaluating candidates, and what's more important, how are their microcultures evaluating candidates? Because the CEO might have an idea, and this is often what happens. You walk in, you talk to the CEO and the executive team and say, what's your culture like? And they go, this is our culture. And then you go to the managers and you say, what's your culture like? Well, this is our culture. And then you go to the people in the field, what's our culture like? And it's a completely different culture in El Paso versus Houston versus San Antonio. So you have to understand that even inside the company, there might be different cultures because of geographic distances. You might even have different cultures inside the same exact building, but different departments, because one VP doesn't quite value the same things that a different VP values. So he really values leadership over here, and she might really value KPIs or whatever, but you have to understand the culture of the company and the microcultures of each department. That's the first thing, and that's what a recruiter should be doing when they're sitting down with a hiring manager. They should be sitting down and saying, all right, let's talk about not just what's on the job description, but let's talk about the personality traits that really, say, piss you off, the ones you really resonate to, what kind of culture you have here, what kind of people out there you're currently working with. I don't want to know who your weak link is, but what is the weak link on your team? So that way, when I look at this job description, it says you need to have 5 years of AutoCAD experience, but maybe you really need 8. We'll say 5 because we don't want to disqualify someone who's really been good at it for maybe the past 5 years and they've just been doing it for 5 years straight. But if I know that going in that we need someone that's really technically sound in these areas, or look, I have a whole bunch of people who are really passive aggressive on my team. I need someone who's going to display some leadership traits, who's going to help grow them out of that. Those are those conversations that should be happening. So when you ask those kind of questions, so that's what you tell the recruiter. Now what the recruiter needs to be doing, and what you need to be doing as a hiring manager when you're interviewing these people, is you need to make sure you're checking for their self-awareness. You need to make sure that you're checking, you're doing motivational style questions, okay? What a motivational style question is different than emotional intelligence. Same idea, but different. Motivational interviews are open-ended, and they say things like, what's the best kind of environment that you thrive in? What kind of leadership style do you respond to best? Now, you might be a micromanager and you're looking for someone to say, I like being micromanaged. But I don't know as a candidate which way to go with that answer. I have to be honest, because I can't just say in the middle of the road. Now, eventually you might say, yeah, I kind of work well as a micromanager. I work well with someone who doesn't give any hands, who's just hands off. But if you ask enough of those questions, 4 or 5, and every answer by the candidate is in the middle lane, then you don't want to hire them because you just don't know who they are. And if you are a candidate and you're interviewing, don't take the middle lane every time. If it is true once in a while, then so be it. But you work better. You're an optimal employee in one side or the other more often than not. And if at a 5 out of 5 questions you decide to choose to be in the middle of the lane, I'm not going to hire you. And no one I've ever worked with is going to hire you, because we don't know who the hell you are. We just know you need a job and you don't want to aggravate anybody. And you can only do that for so long. Okay, next question. Sal from Los Angeles. He asked, what are your thoughts on teleworking and how do you measure success of a teleworker? Now, this is an interesting question because this is our new world, right? We live in a world of teleworkers. We live in a world of working remotely. So just like most companies in January had company goals for the year, and then in April or May, they had to readjust those company goals. You need to reestablish your KPIs and goals with your team. The old KPIs are not the same ones that are realistic or relevant. I'm on a board of directors for a for a $250,000 a year credit union, and a $250,000 in assets credit union. We just discussed our annual goals again last night in our monthly board meeting for the third and the fourth quarter, which were different than what we thought they were going to be in March. So we've already readjusted our goals again. You need to be constantly readjusting your goals with your people, okay? You need to be sure that that they understand and agree to those goals. Now, you can always judge their response time. Perhaps when you were in the same office, 24-hour response time was realistic. Hey, if I write you an email at 9 a.m., I want a response by tomorrow at 9 a.m. Because truthfully, if I didn't get it, I could just walk over to your desk at 2 in the afternoon and go, hey, Tony, quick question. I sent you this email. Can we talk about it real fast? Yeah, let's talk about it. Great. You don't have that opportunity as easily in a remote working environment. So discuss response time and make sure they're on it. Make sure they agree to it. Make sure it's realistic, because truthfully, we're trusting that a lot of our employees, again, like I told you, I got a 4 and a 6-year-old. It's amazing they haven't come in here yet or killed themselves. But my wife isn't here right now. Anything could happen. If you and I are working in the same company, I got to recognize that you might have the same situation going on today, and you just can't always respond immediately to an email or pick up the phone in that moment because there might be a screaming child in the background. You need 3 minutes to get away. I get that. But you need to establish some norms. You need to establish new things that you guys have all agreed to. Quality of work. You can always assess the quality of work, making sure that the quality of work is still what it needs to be. And then lastly, for teleworking employees that manage them, this is where my wife and we differ greatly. I think it's okay to do a pop-in phone call, not a video call, but I think a pop-in phone call once a week to do nothing other than to check in to make sure they're doing okay is okay. Now, if you've established a culture where when you call them, there's something wrong, then you're doing it wrong. I would suggest you're doing leadership wrong. I would say you can quickly change that by today calling every one of your employees or picking, I'm going to call 3 people on Tuesday, 2 people on Wednesday, and 4 people on Thursday, my direct reports, and check in with them and do nothing. Have no agenda other than how are you doing? Now, my wife thinks that's very intrusive, and she suggests you text them. Now, again, you go whichever route you want to go to, but that's kind of where I go with that. I think we need to be just like we would do a pop-in to an office. We needed to be able to do a pop-in for our employees and with a phone call. Now, Stephen asked Google transitional phrases, so you can add to with that as a conclusion to your presentation. Looking at. Oh, thanks, Stephen. I appreciate you helping me with that. Okay, that wasn't a question, but Stephen, I appreciate. Stephen is a great HR professional. If you guys are looking for an HR director or HR senior manager, he might be willing to be a manager for you, but Stephen is a phenomenal HR professional. So certainly be checking him out. See, look, if you put a comment in here, you might even get a shout out that gets you an interview. It's a good way for network. All right, we got time for 3 more minutes for questions. Jessica in Galveston asked, how do you effectively get past an ATS, applicant tracking system, when you're applying to a company? That's a question I get a lot, okay? Applicant tracking systems, first of all, they're not all AI, artificial intelligence systems. I'm sure we're going to get there, but they're very expensive. Especially right now, I don't think many companies are upgrading their applicant tracking systems to be more robust. I think most people are kind of doing more with less. So in general, I don't think an ATS is going to hold you back too much. Now, if you're applying to Microsoft, HP, Google, I am sure ATS systems are rampant there, and they are filtering out clients or candidates before they ever get to a human being. But in general, most of the time, the systems are still getting to a human being before they're disqualified, the resumes. But with that, what you want to do, with that, I did it again. See, Stephen, I need something. I need something to shock me, I think. But then I would be like, so, but in general, for applicant tracking systems, what you need to do is you need to be sure that you're using a lot of the keywords that are on that job description. There's going to be traits that you need to have. There's going to be job requirements, project management, AutoCAD. There's going to be keywords of software. And if you know all of those things in advance, you can then make sure your resume has those traits on the very, very top or embedded somewhere near the top. The professional summary is really a great way to get some of those keywords in there. I have a couple of other tricks that I reserve just for clients, that really work well to get past an applicant tracking system. And I would almost say 100% of the time it's foolproof. But I don't think anything's 100%, but it really works to get you onto some eyes. So, but that's certainly for a phone call, not for a live stream. Okay, I have time for one more question, and I have 3 left here. Nothing on the live stream, so great. So I'll pick the one that's going to take the least amount of time. This is I got a knocker right now. Sorry. See, there's we're now at the live net here, or without a net. Okay, so here's a question that I've gotten a lot recently, which is, if you've survived a layoff and you're still working, is that an accomplishment? And how do you highlight that? Okay, if you still currently have a job, but you think you're in the process of losing your job or might be losing your job really soon, how do you highlight that as an accomplishment? Because it doesn't really sound like an accomplishment. I survived a layoff. But we all know when millions of people have been laid off around the globe, it's a kind of a big deal. So here's what I would say is probably a way you can highlight it without highlighting it. I would put something to the effect of, continue to bring value to the company, and I would highlight a couple of areas that I bring value, while 90% of my peers were laid off. Or whatever the number is. I'd figure out if we had 100 employees or we had whatever is most advantageous too, okay? You might have only laid off as a company 5 employees out of 200. But if all 5 of those employees were in your department of 7, well, now there's only 2 people left out of 7. So I can't do the math real fast, but I'm guessing that's somewhere probably about, I don't know, 80% somewhere were laid off. 5 divided by 7, see, that bothers me now. I got to do the math. 5 divided by 7, yeah, 71. So, you know, continue to bring value when over or more than 70% of my peers were laid off. There's ways to highlight that as an accomplishment without actually saying, look, I wasn't laid off, and that's kind of a big deal. So I hope that helped everybody. As always, please, again, if you like this, give me a like. I'm a words of affirmation guy. You can take away the like later, but I like the like. Follow me on Facebook. I'll be doing a live Q&A tomorrow on Facebook. I will follow me on Instagram, where, again, you're going to get daily tips around a theme. And if you haven't yet, please be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because this content is going to be on there. All other content is on the YouTube channel. And if you just don't have a chance to be able to follow this stuff live, that's a great repository for all of my stuff, and it'll give it to you in a manageable way. So I hope you're doing well. I hope you thought this was valuable. Please share it with somebody that you think might benefit from it. And if you need any help in the future, please reach out to me so I can show you how to get the job. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week. Bye.